The racing season is now in full force as the grass grows green all across America. And with one round of racing in the books for Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS, we're just getting started. For CrowdStrike Racing and AWS, the racing never stopped in the off-season. Tonight is the final round of the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League at Monza in Italy. 2 races, one for the serious and one for the casual, will kick off momentarily. Friends and family from the CrowdStrike Racing and AWS teams are ready to compete in Assetto Corsa Competizione, competing on the track and in the world of cybersecurity. We win as one. CrowdStrike is the official internet and cloud security provider of the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. I'm Kyle Heyer, joined by Tom O'Gorman tonight. Tom, hey, welcome. This is your first time here on one of these broadcasts. Glad to have you with us as Ryan Marine is off doing other things this week. But Tom, 2-time champion in Pirelli World Challenge and 4-time winner in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge. Welcome to the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League back here in Assetto Corsa Competizione.
Well, hello, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here and very excited to watch these racers get to it here at Monza because how cool is this that we have both, like you mentioned, the pro drivers and the AM drivers here for a pair of 25-minute races, taking to Monza to battle each other as intensely as they like. You know, we got the pro drivers here in qualifying, and then we switch over, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Qualifying is underway right now for the pro race. Again, both races are 25 minutes long. Again, the pro race is essentially for the drivers that feel the need to be more competitive and want a bit of a more serious environment. The AM drivers, a little bit less competitive, just here for fun. They'll race right after the conclusion of this race here tonight. A big announcement that we've got coming up this season. This is not the final round of the season. We've got more. We have a 6-round points championship beginning on May 12th. For the CrowdStrike Cup, the 2021 championship. It's going to be divided into Team CrowdStrike, Team AWS, and Team Invite. And basically, everyone's going to be separated to what organization they work for, with the pro split having a 40-minute sprint race, the AM split featuring a 25-minute race, all streamed right here live in the CrowdStrike Racing channels. Potentially prizes and registration info coming soon. It'll be Misano, Zandvoort, Spa, Brands Hatch, Barcelona, and Paul Ricard in the 2021 season. So really excited to have that coming up here. For the time being, though, just tonight, Tom, we've got racing here at Monza. This is a beautiful racetrack, one of the oldest in the world, and it's very, very fast.
Well, and it's famous for being the fastest on the Formula One circuit, and you can see why. There's a whole lot of flat out going on here at Monza, down into the first hairpin chicane. A really, really great passing opportunity, but you got to get the job done before you get out of that into the Curva Grande, basically a flat out straightaway into the second the second chicane, I should say, I'm sorry, and then into the couple of Lesmos, the faster of the two first, then a quick flick of the right into the Variante Ascari, a left-right left chicane, then down into the Curva Parabolica. You basically have 3 straightaways separated by 3 chicanes, and you really need to have a compliant car over the curves here. You also need to have a lot of bravery to draft up alongside somebody and pass them in the braking zones.
Absolutely. And was Italian the language you took in high school, Tom? It wasn't mine.
So no, it certainly wasn't, as you just told by I gave up on the second corner there.
I took French in high school. I can't speak that either, so don't come look at me when we go to Paul Ricard later in the year. I'm not the guy to pick for sure. There's Roman Alexinkov in the Ferrari 488, running right now on pole position, provisional pole for the time being. Time over 1:47.691, and everyone's relative to that time just below that. Josh Staffen goes quickest in the number 23 here, Tom. Qualifying at Monza, important because that first turn is so tight and so technical that on lap number 1, it pays to be near the front.
It really does, and it's interesting just for me to see on the left side of your screen. You can see the make of everybody's car that they've chosen tonight, and whether it's because of the homeland or whether it's because of the way the car makes its speed, we see a lot of Ferraris. Look at all of those, 5 of them on your board as it is right now, but the Honda NSX is at the top, the Acura with Josh Staffen, and again, I haven't been here with you guys for most of this season. I haven't necessarily kept tabs, but I have to imagine that Josh Staffen is at the front no matter what he drives.
Yeah, he's been really rock solid. He's experimented with different kinds of cars throughout the season and looking good in the Acura here this week, or the Honda overseas, and working his way down towards turn number 1. Of course, I'd like to thank CrowdStrike Racing for having us here again tonight. This has been a really fun way to kind of get everyone together during the off-season, especially during the pandemic. well, everyone's working from home. CrowdStrike was one of the first people to jump on board that train, and of course now we can also race while we're at home as well. CrowdStrike and AWS have both been leaders in securing their remote workforce since long before the pandemic. And of course, we're glad to have everybody, friends and family from those two organizations taking part here. If you'd like to learn more about CrowdStrike Racing and their virtual racing or the real world racing, you can visit their website, CrowdStrikeRacing.com, to learn more about not only the upcoming real-world season, but the virtual racing season as well. Tom, we already have one round in the books back at Sonoma a few weeks ago. We've got Circuit of the Americas coming up in just a couple weeks, and excited to go to Coda, but tonight virtually and in one of Italia? Wow, one of Italy's oldest racetracks.
Well, and speaking of real world, Kevin Boehm goes to second place by 0.2 of a second. There he is in his CrowdStrike Mercedes, which is a replica of the car he races in real life, although he races the Civic Type R version in the SRO TC America class. That car has the same livery no matter where it races, and he goes to second place. So he bumps the Ferraris down to third, fourth, and fifth. So it's Staffen and Boehm. And it's very tight quarters up here at the top of the board with 7 minutes to go in qualifying. Really pushing the curbing at the second Lesmos, and maybe a bit of a draft. Is that perhaps a teammate in front, or has he just gotten lucky?
Just a Porsche out in front, so no teammate there. Of course, you mentioned Kevin Boehm. Well, he's got a couple TC America wins in his belt already. Back at Sonoma, won his TC race on Sunday and third in class on the Saturday. Whoop, there's a car off track. You're going to have to avoid it. Good thing here, Tom, is that there's plenty of space to miss accidents. There's a lot of chicanes with paved runoff, and you can escape if you need to.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be a key for the races, because this is a pretty high-risk, high-reward track. You know, you need to be pretty bold on the brakes, as we see Kevin Boehm lunge at the inside, almost a quick lane change there at the entry to the Parabolica, and then we'll finally get set up for what will hopefully be a new flying lap for the number 9 car. But like you mentioned, you need a bit of an out here because it is so high speed. I'm pretty sure, you can fact check me if, or somebody in the comments may fact check me, but this is the fastest circuit on the Formula One circuit, a circuit that they go to, and I have to imagine for GT3 cars, it is also among the fastest that anybody goes to.
So much speed you can carry here. Of course, CrowdStrike also involved in the Lewis Hamilton Formula One program with the Mercedes-AMG Petronas team. They've got the logo, I believe, right on the halo this year, which is a really cool addition to that livery. So you mentioned the Formula One ties. Of course, CrowdStrike also teaming up with Mercedes-AMG in the Formula One series. If you'd like to follow us along, you can use hashtag CrowdStrike Cup to post about this event on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you do that and stay engaged as we head into the rest of the season. So we're going to have an eye on Kevin Boehm for a little while. Here's a driver that has been performing really well lately as well. Zach Koonin in the number 300. Different livery on this car this week, but you mentioned the prancing horses. Lots of them at the front. 3 of them in the top 5 here, Tom.
Yeah, it's Alexandrov, Koonin, and Reichert in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th positions in front of the first Aston Martin, which is a little out of place, maybe, the British car here at the Italian iconic circuit. But you can see that these Ferraris tend to be really quick down the straightaways, and it's not a surprise to see them towards the front here at Monza. They just have such good gearing for a track like this. Maybe not the fastest accelerating car, but they do tend to be really compliant over the curves, and they do tend to be very fast once they get up to speed with that twin-turbo V8. So it's I think it's kind of an obvious choice here, not only being the homeland, but also the way the car makes speed here.
And maybe what's not an obvious choice is the Porsche 911 GT3R. There is Bill Clark in the number 92, the pink pig livery. There's a handful of Porsches in this field, 4 by my count. And this was a really good choice a couple weeks ago when we went to the Hungaroring in the wet, Tom, that helped the cars grip up really nicely on corner exit.
Yeah, and it's all about the platform, right? So you have the mid-engine Ferrari, but the gearing is such that it makes great speed in a straight line, and is also very compliant of the curbs. The Porsche, a rear-engine car, or as close to rear engine as you're going to get in these days, is all about rear grip. And here at Monza, you really don't need a whole lot of rear grip. You need a lot of straight line speed, you need a lot of braking performance, and it's not a surprise to hear that that car did really well in the rain at Hungaroring, a track that's a little lower average speed, and you kind of dig out of a couple of corners here and there. There's Sam Parnett in the Rover Racing oil machine as well. It's just not necessarily the track for this Porsche, I don't think.
No, maybe not. And looking up and down the order and looking at all the different manufacturers, of course, GT3 Racing using balance of performance, weight and power adjustments to kind of keep all the cars relatively similar, but of course they all have their advantages and disadvantages, and there is a lone driver running the British brand of McLaren. That would be Burleson in 9th in the number 720. He's the only one in this car this week. This was another popular choice at the Hungaroring a few weeks ago, but maybe not excelling in outright top speed because you'd think more people would have chosen it.
Well, and check out the aero of this car. It just looks so beautiful with how much addition has been added to the factory bodywork of this McLaren 720S GT3. And the extra fins, the extra wings, the extra width of the fenders of this car. I'm not entirely surprised, even though I don't necessarily keep track of the BOP here in Assetto Corsa Competizione, that this car is not necessarily the fastest in a straight line or at Monza overall, but for this driver to be in the top 10, Ian Burleson's doing a pretty solid job, I'd say.
For sure, running 9th right now. Of course, in the YouTube chat where this race is being live streamed, if you've got any questions for myself or Tom, of course, Tom having extensive real-world racing experience, feel free to drop those in there, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability. 2 minutes left here in qualifying, Tom. We're going to have a 25-minute race. At the Hungaroring, we saw a lot of spins and slides and some really solid racing, but I've seen in the last couple rounds of this that the AM race is generally has been the closer battle because it's sort of a revolving door at the front of the field. I think the pro drivers would like to have a little bit of side-by-side racing themselves today, and this is a great place to do it because you've got so many straightaways. The slipstream is going to keep everybody tight and bunched up. So how do you race a track like this in the slipstream versus a track that's a little bit more tighter and technical? How do you attack it from a race strategy perspective?
Well, this race is all about timing and, again, strategy with when do you make your move. You know, you have your move, you have the high-speed chess match that you always talk about with racing. You see our top 4 drivers are within 4/10 of each other there on the left side of your screen. If you make your pass in the first lap, all of a sudden that driver that you passed has the entire race to work with to make the pass back. But if you time your pass just right, that you make that pass on the final lap and they don't have an opportunity to respond, all of a sudden you find yourself in a very great position. So these pro drivers especially will be able to do that calculation. They'll be able to figure out, okay, if I'm in this position at this time in the race, I will have this strength, and so on and so forth. If you are an AM driver, honestly, the AM drivers tend to be more fun to watch because there are more opportunities for mistakes. And the opportunity for mistakes presents opportunity for capitalization from the other drivers around you, and therefore better racing for us, the spectators. So both have their pluses and their negatives as far as us watching go, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the top 4 kind of settle into a rhythm and maybe jockey a bit to be in the position you want to be in for that last lap, which I would bet is probably second.
I bet you're right. There's Brett Reichert in the number 15 Ferrari 488. Chris Locke in a Mercedes just jumped up in between. You'll notice the changes on this car, this Mercedes here, what we're looking at, this yellow and green one. You'll notice it's got the Evo kit, Tom, that newer generation aero adjustment. This car didn't see a lot of actual changes, just some slight electronics adjustments and some changes to the bodywork, but boy, does that new Mercedes look mean. And there's only a handful of cars out there that look like that one for the majority. I think Kevin Boehm's still running the non-Evo version of the Mercedes. Just slight changes, Tom, but here they are represented here in the simulator, and nice to see.
Well, it's interesting to hear that maybe Kevin's not running the Evo kit and Locke is, because a lot of times the Evo kit means better downforce, it means better grip. And here at Monza, specifically, when you want straight line speed, you want to be able to maximize these long runs between hairpins. Maybe downforce isn't king, and maybe the old version of the Mercedes with less aerodynamic optimization is actually faster. And you see that on the left side of your screen. There's nearly a second between the two of them, so perhaps Boehm knows something that the rest of us don't.
So with qualifying complete here, yellow flag out for the car stopped on the front straightaway. We're going to head to the race here again. 25 minutes coming up for our pro race here in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. Going to kick things off. And then as soon as that race completes, we'll head straight into the AM race, where we're due to see some exciting action, as we always do in the AM race. Again, I'm Kyle Heyer with Tom O'Gorman joining us this week, with Ryan Marine being absent this time around. Hopefully he'll be back for the next one, which will be on May 12th. We're going to kick things off at Mazzano, another Italian racetrack, I believe, and that will be where we'll start our next season for points. And again, potentially prizing. Registration info coming soon. CrowdStrikeRacing.com to learn more. In just a minute, we're going to grid up. We'll get a pace lap, Tom, and on that pace lap, every driver's got to be thinking about that run to turn 1. What do you do to prep for that sprint to that first corner?
Well, it's so interesting here because you have that fast right and then left sequence. And if you're a fan of Formula One, if you're a fan of any sort of GT racing that happens here at Monza, it's not necessarily the inside line that you want for turn one as it is at many circuits, because you immediately switch back to the left. You have to get a run out of that corner. And a lot of times the driver on the left side comes out ahead. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see where the drivers end up. But I think no matter what, it's capitalizing on the green flag and getting a run into turn one that's going to become really critical.
So just waiting for the session to tick on over here. Still showing qualifying at the top of our screen. There we go. Now we've got them gridded up on the main screen here on the front straightaway. And you'll notice where we're starting here, Tom. This start-finish line near the end of the pit wall. This is not where we're going to finish the race. And this is an important distinction because you mentioned wanting to pass the driver on the last lap. Well, you're not going to have room to do it at the final corner, or at least past it, because you're going to pick up the checkered flag right at the exit of the Parabolica corner. If we go back to the track map, that's on the very far right. You can see how soon that start-finish line is, but where the red changes to green. We're actually going to start way farther down towards turn number 1, and we're going to finish back towards turn number 8. So that's going to change how you attack it. I think your last passing opportunity is heading into Curva Parabolica on that final lap.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To give you an idea of spacing on that front straightaway where the red turns to green, the start is actually about 2/3 of the way down that. So if you kind of define that front straightaway into thirds, I should say, then that gives you an idea. The start happens much later, and that's to give the entire field an opportunity to get onto the front straightaway, get formed up, and then it's a much shorter run down into turn 1. So Josh Staffen in the Honda on the inside will have Kevin Boehm to his outside, but it's not going to be a massive surprise if the outside lane, the left side lane, which are the poorer qualifiers to their insides, have the better run.
Notice a handful of the Bentley Continental GT3 platform. I count maybe two of them right now. One is Matt Feller in the 8 car, and then of course it'll be Pratik Mishra in the number 7 in one of those Bentleys. Big burly cars here, Tom, at the tighter, twistier tracks. Maybe not the car to have, but if I wanted to have any car, maybe the one that makes the deepest, loudest, gruntiest sound would be the one to have at these big tracks. But they're starting pretty deep in the field.
They certainly sound spectacular, and again, a front-engine rear-wheel drive car here at a circuit where you kind of just do chicanes and then long straightaways. This car will really come into its own in really high-speed sections. So if it comes down to the Lesmos or maybe the Parabolica, this car could come into its own. But a lot of times this car finds itself at home more in maybe the Bathurst kind of tracks where you have a really high-speed kind of handling section, and the balance gives you a lot more advantage, I would say. So back here in the 14th and 16th positions respectively, who knows, maybe they work together, maybe they find themselves as hey, you're in a Bentley, I'm in a Bentley, let's help each other out here a bit.
There's the Acura NSX GT3 to the right of one of those Bentleys. That's Jackson Rusin, who's had some really solid runs. You actually got a chance to test drive one of these cars, Tom, and we're pretty darn good in it as well, from what I understand. This car, dynamically, is also really, really solid. But how is it on the long straightaways here? Do you think it'll be competitive? We've got one sitting on pole. We've also got one buried pretty deep in the field.
Well, I think it is among the more handling cars in the GT3 category. So I think the fact that one is on pole here at Monza is more a testament to Josh Staffen's abilities behind the wheel than it is this specific car. But the the Acura NSX GT3 Evo is, it's unbelievable to drive. And my experience behind the wheel is more telling to the technology that goes into these GT3 cars from every manufacturer. It's just spectacular how much they put into them, and it's a platform in which the driving aids kind of help the driver succeed, and it's a car that makes speed in a way that no other car can in every way. So these cars are just spectacular to drive, and it was an honor to drive one for sure.
Well, you mentioned the electronics and the driver aids. Now, for a driver like Kevin Boehm, who again runs in TC America, the driver aids are typically more of the variation that you see coming out of the factory, in the Honda factory. But in a GT3 car, Tom, they're everything but. What are those changes? I mean, we've got, of course, anti-lock brakes, we've got traction control, but they're different algorithms maybe, and then that's what allows them to be so much better?
Yeah, certainly. They have anti-lock brakes, they have traction control, and they also have stability control, which you might also consider yaw control. So you have sideways, long to front, back to front, and then you also have those anti-lock brakes. And just the way the car is tuned in its race tuning is so different from a street vehicle. So, you know, Kevin Boehm's Civic Type R that is rooted in a street vehicle, you just turn them all off and you drive it the way you need to drive it, and it is what it is. But in these GT3 cars, they really help you go faster, and it's because they're tuned that way. So as the tires wear off and as the car starts to get a little bit slower, rather than not leaning on the driver aids, rather than driving it the way you want to drive it, you actually kind of lean into them and you help it let you go faster. It will really assist you at going faster the way you want to go fast. So you can dial how much slip you want to have. You can dial how much forward to rear bite you want to have, and they're all knobs on your steering wheel, and it's a pretty incredible experience.
Rolling off for our pace lap now. Engines are fired and rolling now at the Temple of Speed. I love racetracks that have sort of personifications or nicknames of the sort. Bristol, the world's fastest half mile. Road America, the National Park of Speed. I just love tracks that have that sort of wonder. One of the parts of this racetrack that we're not racing on here today, you might get a glimpse of it when we take a right here in turn number 1. Just beyond the trees there, Tom, is the oval that was run only a handful of times way, way back in the day. One of the fastest and most treacherous racetracks in the world. The oval no longer used, but still remnants of it remain. I think it was mostly restored in recent years, just for the visual appeal of it. But almost like you know, a temple you'd find in the jungle, but here in Italy, and for race cars, which is my favorite one.
And we had a similar experience. The both of us got to go to Willow Springs Raceway, which was the kind of oldest road in the West. It's a really fast, sweeping, high-speed track, similar to this one, but out in Southern California. And it was just kind of awestruck to me, standing on pit lane and considering what would it have been like to drive a car from 1970 around, or 1965 around a track like this. You think about how fast and how incredible it would have been to drive a Formula One car from that era around a track like Monza. It's just spectacular. So the fact that we get to do it here in a simulator, and we get to do it here with CrowdStrike Racing in GT3 cars, the way the real drivers get to do it, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch these guys tackle it.
There's a handful of racetracks that come to mind anytime you mention, you know, the top 10 racetracks in the world, and for different people it's a different list, but for me, you know, when you look to Europe especially, there's a handful that make that list, and Spa is one of them, which is where CrowdStrike Racing will compete, or has competed, in the 24 Hours of Spa. Monza's got to make the list. You can probably put Silverstone on there as well, but then you look across to places like the United States, and you've got to take places like Watkins Glen and Road America, Laguna Seca, put them on the list. Bathurst in Australia is a favorite of a lot of people, and you know, Suzuka, another racetrack that kind of gets on that list. So there's just a handful of racetracks in the world that deserve to be called the best, and I think Monza has got to be one of those for sure, just based on its outright speed, its appeal to fans, and its very, very long history in motor racing, and will continue to be written here today in a virtual form, maybe not with quite the consequences of making a mistake, but certainly the competition is going to be very strong.
Well, and remember, on the qualifying side, we have an Acura, a Mercedes, and 2 Ferraris that were within 4/10 of each other. So this is going to be a spectacular race between Staffen Boeb, Alex Seenkoff, and Koonin. And who knows, maybe the draft keeps more people involved. This is going to be a spectacular 25-minute sprint.
Just after 2 o'clock local time here at Monza, in the virtual representation of Italy for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. Thanks for joining us here on YouTube. Make sure you stay engaged with the chat, hashtag CrowdStrike Cup on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We're racing for 25 minutes. At the conclusion of this race, we're going to head straight into the AM race. They will already be gridding and rolling by the time we load into there, so don't go away at the conclusion of this race. Josh Staffen in the Acura NSX GT3. He's on driver's right. On driver's left, Kevin Boehm, competitor for CrowdStrike Racing and DXDT Racing, in the number 9 Honda Civic Type R TC car. Behind them, Roman Alexeinkov, Zach Koonin in 2 Ferrari 488 GT3s. But we come through the final corner here at Monza, and now it's a slow creep down to the start-finish line. And then the sprint down to turn number 1, and everybody's real tense here, Tom. It's just going to be a moment. There it is. Green flag flies. We're racing at the Temple of Speed for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. Already 3 wide behind him. There's on the inside. That's Chris Locke, I believe, in the number 6. He's going to try 3 abreast into turn number 1. They're getting in contact behind him as they get under the brakes hard for the first corner.
Oh, and that is so high risk. Alex Zinkov is really deep on the brakes, but makes it work. A couple of cars spin around. They were 5 wide at the green flag, and it did not pay off. But tries to pull back across the nose, and there's still the rest of the field to go across. So the rest of the field gets stacked up, and now a number of drivers are spun in turns 1 and 2.
That was the 53, one of those cars that was around Austin Murphy and Ian Bertelsen in the McLaren that was crashed. Here comes Kevin Boehm on a dive into turn number 3. That's the second chicane down there, but looks like Staffan's going to hang on to the spot for now as we come on through. So this field sort of split in two with that spin in turn 1, and Tom, that's just Monza.
It really is, yeah. That's just what happens when you have a high-speed entry into a really low-speed corner. If things go wrong, things spread out really quickly. But Boehm was looking racy down into the second chicane. He got a little behind the car. Looks like the car got away from him for a bit, had to gather it up, and now he's under really big attack from Alex Zinkov there in the first of the Ferraris, the 612 car. You see the top speed that car has. He's really pulled up onto the back into the Ascari chicane, and they stream through for the first time, but it looks like Staffen might have a little bit of a break.
So you might get a break just for a moment. The question is, how long is that break going to last? We're going to find out here in just a moment. Lost my mouse for a minute. There we go. Now we're back as we head into Parabolica. There's Zach Coonan defending or attacking Alex Zinkov. Chris Locke in the Evo variant of the Mercedes-AMG GT3 right there in 5th. That car's having a good run so far. Bit of a gap back to Dean Benaviste in the 75, and it's Bill Clark. And side-by-side battle, Ruth Pera in the 52 and Sam Parmet in the 98 Porsche versus Ferrari.
A couple of those Porsches trying to work their way up the field after the attrition at the first corner, but now back in at the draft. Look at the top speed of that Ferrari. Just has absolute domination over the Porsche until the braking zone. The Porsche pulls around the outside. Not going to work down into turn number 1 in a massive curb hop.
Yeah, there's those anti-cut sausage curbs down there, Tom, and if you drive over those, they're going to launch the car skyward. As we go a little bit deeper in the field, there's Adam Youngblood in the number 001. Right behind, I believe is that the 2 car? Or is that Matt Geffeller in the number 8? No, Geffeller's up the road a little bit. It is the 2 of Vadim Mola. He got by in turn number 1. That's the Aston Martin Vantage GT3. Good-looking car. Here comes Hunter Reeve in the 44. And Ian Bertelsen on a charge back after that initial spin in turn 1.
Yeah, these are all drivers that got stacked up. Look at that dominating pass for the McLaren up the inside and a little bit too deep for all the drivers. Anti-cut curbs are going to keep the 001 in the inside of the circuit, and the McLaren of Ian Bertelsen goes through nice and comfortably, actually. So these drivers have all been put far out of touch of the top running group cars, but as you mentioned, the racing really deep here in the back of the field.
Well, he didn't get a lot of damage in that turn 1 spin. It was just a spin. That's all it was. So nothing really to report in terms of body work that they're going to have to get redone. Josh Staffen leads by 1 second. That's on the outer edge of the draft for Kevin Boehm, but it looks like Boehm is trying to keep him reeled in as they head into Parabolica to complete the second lap. He might be able to run him back down, but it's going to require a lot of effort and no mistakes.
Yeah, it's going to. He's just got to be picture perfect from this point. It looks like really Josh Staffen's NSX is hooked up. Look at him cut the distance out of the Parabolica. He's just glued to the right side of the track. Kevin Boehm was tracked out to the left and then tucked back in to maybe get a little sniff at that draft. But on the left side of your screen, you see 1.16 seconds between the two of them. And Boehm is not really even hunting for that draft. I think the Mercedes is going for the long run. That's his only hope at this point. Staffen just has to be nice and consistent and make sure that he doesn't start to overdrive that car, because the mid-engine platform can be a little bit more punishing than that front-engine rear-wheel drive platform. Look at this down into turn 1.
The 52 car of Ruth Pera a little bit scrambled right now as the 98 of Sam Parmet attacks him. They were 3 wide going into the first corner, just behind the Matt Geffeller in the 8 car, watching from 12th, and he's got the best view of everybody as they scrap heading towards that second chicane.
Well, Parmet has picked up a bunch of positions in that number 98 Porsche. Look at him side by side up the inside with B. Clark. Oh, they're so stacked up. He's going to go side by side through turns 4 and 5 in that second chicane, and that is really, really tight quarters. These guys demonstrating why they're in the pro race. That is spectacular driving between the two of them, but it is actually Behera that is the cork in the bottle a bit in that Ferrari. Finally gets driven past. Barnett picks up the position, but Behera in the number 52 is really struggling, I think, in that Ferrari.
A little bit scrambling right now. The Bentley's running door to door. They have yet to sort it out. All the way back here for about 12th spot. Up at the front, no changes there. A bit of a scramble starting behind Chris Locke in this number 6. He's got Zach Coonan behind him. But Chris Lock has moved forward, Kunin's dropped backwards, a little bit surprising perhaps based on their qualifying pace, Tom. You'd think that in a vacuum, where you qualify is where you're going to run because that's your outright speed, but drivers could draft in qualifying as well, so maybe they weren't quite stacked up how they should have been.
Yeah, it may be a bit of a roulette, and as you mentioned, Chris Lock here in the white and pink and green Mercedes has picked up a spot. He was a couple of car lengths back, actually, of Kunin, so Kunin might be struggling in the 300 Ferrari, but now he sets his sights on Alexandrov, who is in the white Ferrari up the road just a little bit. Again, I have to imagine the Mercedes maybe not the best car for this circuit, but Chris Lock doing a great job. Ooh.
Kunin a little bit deep on the brakes and almost tagged the back of Chris Lock. Just missed the braking zone there, Tom, and good thing there's an escape road. Kunin was able to take it and miss everything. As we go back to the battle here, there's Bill Clark on the outside of the 7, Pratik Mishra in the silver Bentley, and it is getting very aggressive back here for 10th spot. These three have not really relinquished this fight.
Well, how about Mishra looking so racy on the back of the Porsche? Mishra in the Bentley, the bit of a run, and that's kind of one of the things about Monza. You have a sniff of that draft. You get a little bit bold in the braking zones, but you got to actually have the car underneath you when you get to the braking zone, when you get to the turning point, so you can feel like you're going to make that position up, and then all of a sudden you lose all that ground. Look at the ground that Mishra has lost. He might have felt like he was faster than Clark was in the Porsche, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh no, I'm getting driven away from.
Matt Feller and the similar-looking Bentley behind him, Vadim Mola. Whoa, big slide on the corner exit, and there is Ian Burleson, a little bit less dramatic, going wide. But the two Bentleys, they have not been able to get away from each other here, Tom. And every time you run side by side, you're giving up precious time to the people in front.
You gotta just lift at this point. If you're Mishra, they're gonna race each other down into the Ascari chicane. Oh, and this is just hemorrhaging so much time between the two of them. You got the K-Pax livery car on the outside. Whoa. Oh, and he gets tagged, spun.
Slide and a spin for Vadim Mola in the number 2 car. And he gets tagged and tangled up with one of the Bentleys. And they will get back moving. But the exit of Ascari is a high load area on the tires, Tom. The car just wants to drive out to the edge of the racetrack. And if there's someone in the way, you gotta be cautious that you don't get yourself tangled up there. But looks like they're gonna be able to drive away from that situation. And now the entire field's a bit more spread out than I would have thought here, Tom. 1.1 from Staffen back to Bohm.
I really am surprised, and I think Josh Staffen is putting on kind of a clinic as far as driver is concerned, because I would have expected a car, maybe a different car to be at the front of this field, but that Acura NSX GT3 Evo is doing a spectacular job. Kevin Bohm trying to stay in touch, and they really haven't fluctuated more than about a tenth or two of a second between the deficit there on the left side of the screen. You saw at the beginning of the race it grew to about 1.1 seconds. Now it's just shy of 1.3, but I do wonder which car has the longevity. I think the Mercedes might be a bit better in the long run. This is not really a long race, though. 25 minutes, and we're only 10 minutes in. Bohm might be coming back.
I was watching Bohm through the chicane, and I noticed that he was taking a lot less curb than Josh Staffen. Now, Tom, your experience here in Assetto Corsa Competizione was that the curbs are often a little bit unpredictable here, and sometimes it is advantageous to take less of them. Do you think that's something Kevin Bohm is doing here, or is that real-world experience of taking care of your equipment and not hammering those curbs kicking in?
No, that's a great point. I think the risk-reward of taking the curbs is certainly a thing you have to factor in. If you look at the left side of your screen now, the last time I said anything, it was just shy of 1.3. Now it's 0.8 for Kevin Bohm, up to the leader of Josh Staffen. And a lot of that is due to the risk-reward of taking the curbs, where Staffen might be a bit more bold, maybe knows that his car is not the best car for Monza. He's got to take those curbs. Kevin Bohm's a little more calm, maybe a little more collected in the Mercedes, knows he doesn't have to pound off of them, and is just going to let the race come back to him. But just as we say that, Josh Staffen may be running a much lower downforce setup because he pulled 3/10 down that front straightaway.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about the Mercedes having advantages in places that you wouldn't expect it to, based on how it sounds and how it looks. You'd think it'd be sort of a drag race car, but in reality, it's a bit more of a handling car. Both in the sim and the real world. Here is another one of those Mercedes, Chris Lock in the number 6. He's got some pressure from Zach Kunin, but they're sort of running in sort of a 2-car tango right now with Brett Reichert in the 15 behind him in a Ferrari. And then it's a little ways back to find Dean Benaviste, and he's battling Sam Parmet here for 7th.
Oh, we have 5 Ferraris in the top 9, and now the 75 goes for the over-under. A bit of a run out, shows the nose up the inside, but I don't think it's going to happen on the Rova Porsche. dives down to the inside. You see that rear engine car really try to square the corner up, use all the curb on the way out. Parmet will keep the position now over Benavista.
Whoa, a bit of a slide there on corner exit. That's a bit of a surprise out of the Porsche. Again, the GT3R retains the rear engine configuration, while the GT Endurance car that runs in the WC Endurance Championship is now officially a mid-engine design. All that weight over the rear wheels generally makes these cars real strong out of the corners, but Parmet able to get it sideways. Oh, a bit awkward for Dean through the Ascari chicane. But Parmet using every bit of the racetrack there, Tom, all the way out to the dirt.
Well, you thought for a second that Benavista was going to really close up on the brakes, and then you saw how he paid for it. He was too deep into the Ascari chicane and really lost at least 5 car lengths, if not more, in that Ferrari. So charging too deep in on the brakes, and we're basically half distance now on this race. 25 minutes race and 13 and a half minutes to go, closing in on. These guys have got to go when they can.
There's Vadim Mola in the number 2. He's had a couple issues so far. You see the damage on the nose of that car. Pratik Mishra had another spin a little while ago. It dropped him all the way down to 15th alongside Adam Youngblood, who's gone backwards this race as well. And again, a lot of slipstreaming down the straightaway. Let's ride on board here with Pratik Mishra. Look at the slipstream. Look at how much time he's gaining.
Oh, it's massive. Goes to the outside. That's a great protection from the Aston Martin. But all of a sudden, that Bentley is going to get the inside for turn number 2. Deep on the brakes down into the first chicane. Here comes the Aston Martin. It's way too deep. Has to check up. Barely dodges. I wonder, was the 7 of Pratik Mishra distracted in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, that's got to be a huge distraction. Every time you go on the brakes, you're slowing down from about 175, 180 miles an hour all the way down to about 30. So you know that if someone makes a mistake, it's going to be a big one. And that could certainly throw off your concentration. Going back up to 4th placers, Chris Locke in the 6 and Zach Coonan. This is one of the tightest battles on the racetrack. It's been the most consistent one as well. They've been sort of in lockstep with each other. 2 cars of a very different design. Mid-engine, very sleek compared to the quite rotund but also powerful sounding Mercedes. And running nose to tail, here comes Coonan.
This is going to be a big run for Coonan, but a great protection from Locke up the inside. The number 6 picks the inside entry for the Parapolica. It's a drag race between the 2, Mercedes versus Ferrari. Who is deeper on the brakes? We don't even know. The Ferrari commandingly sweeps around the outside. Zachary Coonan takes the position in the number 300 car, picks up 4th.
Yeah, he just swooped in there and took it. And sometimes you got to be decisive about that, Tom. If you leave that door open, that could have given Locke the run back to the inside, and he could have drag raced him back. But now Locke is going to get the slipstream on the straightaway here. But is it going to be enough? I don't think so, unless he makes a huge dive from 3 car lengths back. He's not going to try.
No, it tucks in, and it's kind of the old adage, it's a lot easier to pass somebody in a straight line than it is in a corner. And right now we're seeing, I think, that straight line speed of the Ferraris kind of start to benefit each other. But interestingly, up at the front, the Acura NSX has pulled out another 4/10 over Kevin Bohm. Staffen, while it may not look like much there in the chicane, there you see it start to stretch out. Once they accordion back out, it's 1.5 seconds, where a couple of laps ago it was only 0.8. I think Staffen has this one under control.
Yeah, he has just been rock solid with no mistakes here. We have seen Josh make some mistakes this season. He has not been as flawless as he was back in the GT Rivals Championship a couple seasons ago, about a calendar year ago. Kevin Bohm, though, he's mostly been in an announcing role lately. He's only joined I think this might actually be his first race of this season. He might have run one earlier, a little earlier in the year, but he has not been in the sim a whole lot, at least in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League races he's been watching. So this is sort of jumping back in, and you've got to kind of acclimate to your environment here, Tom. Each sim is a little different. And sometimes it's like riding a bike, but sometimes it's totally not, especially when the game gets updates in between.
Yeah, and it's kind of tough to put yourself back into the simulator mindset. Like we mentioned, Kevin Bohm races in the real world with the TC America series in a Civic Type R, and when you have that real world versus sim world experience, you have to learn to exploit the simulator in a certain way that allows you to go fast. And some drivers really struggle with that. Some drivers excel at that, compartmentalizing the two. And it looks like Kevin Bohm has done a really good job of compartmentalizing those 2 experiences and making sure that when he jumps back on the simulator, he can do well. The difference is Josh Staffen, who is a sim racing professional, as far as we're concerned, has seemed to have not slipped up at all in that time frame and is kind of dominating this race. closely dominating, I should say. 1.5 seconds, it's not that much. That could switch at any moment.
Doesn't matter if you win by a millimeter or a mile, it's still a win. And Josh Staffen, again, you mentioned sort of sim racing professional. He's also responsible for a lot of the setup of this series, so thanks to him for helping out with that. And you see Kevin Boehm get a little bit off track there. This battle is going to continue. I'm going to jump back a little bit deeper in the field, back to Adam Youngblood in the 1. He's got Pratik Mishra behind him in the number 7. Or at least he did, as Mishra goes around again in turn number 1. This started off really, really good for the 7, but Tama just devolved into a couple spins and slides, and he's unable to get this back in the right direction.
Yeah, spins again and then resets back to the pit lane. Unfortunately, the number 7 Bentley is going to call it a day, I think, with 9 minutes to go in this 25-minute sprint race. Just looking on the order, look at those 5 Ferraris in the top 7, 8, I should say. But then we get out of the battle for the top 10, and we have a nice variety of cars. Here we're watching Arub Berra trying to defend off of Clark in the pink Porsche, just behind, pursuing, looking really quick.
You know what I love about Bill Clark is he's got not only the pink thing on the outside, but he's got the visor to match. I'm not sure how effective that is unless he's running some sort of virtual reality screens inside there to see where he's going, but looking good. And he's got Ian Burleson, who has done a really good job charging back after the spin. Tom, have you ever had something like this happen in a race where it started off badly, but you were able to kind of drive back through it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I actually crashed the car into a tire wall in the rain. It was my first professional win in a series was a race that I crashed a car into a tire wall, and now we see Burleson go to the outside, and it's all about, again, like kind of compartmentalizing that into, okay, it happened, I can't control it. Burleson slices across the nose of Clark and takes the position down into turn number 1 decisively. Number 720 McLaren takes the point, but you really can't dwell on it because you can't control it. It happened, it is what it is, and you got to move on.
Burleson moving on and moving forward right now up to 9th place. Back up to Chris Locke. Got Brett Reichert behind him in that number 15 Ferrari. And last time by, ran a 148.813, which was just about 2/10 faster than Chris Locke in front of him. So could he reel in this Mercedes in the last 7.5 minutes? Time is yet to tell. I'm most curious as to why the field spread out so much, Tom. You would think at a track like Monza, the draft would come in a little bit more strongly than it is. So this is a little surprising to me that the field has had so much room to breathe.
Well, with the drafting and with the dynamics of Monza comes those really high-intensity moments where things get a little bit wild, and then they maybe or maybe not end up in disaster. And we've seen a couple of big spins. We've seen a couple of things that have separated the field out. So we have these kind of mano-a-mano battles happening, and we're riding along board with Brett Reichert trying to run down Locke. Those types of things tend to be a little bit more natural for the end of these races, but at the beginning, with so many cars stacked up together, it's not really a surprise to see that this has spread out a bit.
Last time by, Josh Staffen up front ran a 147.955. That was a little quicker than Kevin Boehm's 148.021. And I think everyone's sort of found their spot. And this is going to be maybe in contrast to the AM race coming up here in about 7 or 8 minutes worth of time. When we get into that race, Tom, I think it's going to be a little bit more mobility up and down the field. A little bit more chaos always seems to happen in the amateur race, and that's going to make things very, very, very exciting.
Well, mobility is certainly a friendly way of putting that. I think with the drafting nature of this track especially, we just mentioned the kind of compression up and down the field. It has the tendency to end in a disaster in those tight chicanes. So you get a little bold for your britches, I would say, and all of a sudden you're charging into a hairpin, you realize you're not going to make it, and things end in disaster.
Boehm working through Ascari, trying to exploit the track limits here a little bit. Some of those anti-cut curbs preventing you from taking a nice short lane around. Lost some time there, though. Struggling to keep up with Josh Staffen. About a minute 48 a lap. A handful left to go. Not too much longer here in the pro race. And again, our next season of CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League action kicks off on May 12th after our real Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS round number 2 at Circuit of the Americas. We're going to head to Misano here in the Sim on May 12th, then June 16th, about a month later, to Zandvoort Spa-Francorchamps on July 14th, just before the real Spa 24 Hours, Tom, which is going to be a whole lot of fun. August 11th, we Brands Hatch, then Barcelona on September 22nd, right before the European Barcelona round. Then we'll finish things off at Paul Ricard on October 20th, where all this began in GT Rivals about a year ago, right as the pandemic started. So the more things change, the more things stay the same. Now, of course, not the official Fanatec GT World Challenge America Esports Championship starting there, but it will be Paul Ricard for the CrowdStrike Racing League finishing their final race of the season. So that will happen all the way down in October when the leaves are orange, and we're about to, I think we'll be a couple weeks after our final round of the real season at Indianapolis, which I had my first Indy experience last fall, Tom, and that is a heck of a place to race.
Yeah, it is, and it's also really cool to see that sim racing has maintained its point or its status in racing in any capacity here after we've picked up real racing back in the real world. And this is kind of a discipline that I started racing in, as we see Vadi Mola kind of pull past maybe the Rover Racing Porsche, letting him go. But I started in sim racing, and for it to become kind of a staple in motorsports, professional or otherwise, is really cool to see. 3.5 minutes left to go in this race. Josh Staffen and Kevin Bohm have kind of stabilized their gap, but this is a good battle. Oh, Parmet maybe showing a bit of front tire wear or perhaps a bit of fatigue on the brakes.
Yeah, something of the sort. And you mentioned, you started in sim racing, and as did I. But I think one of the cool things that I have to remember and sort of pinch myself is in 2021, when you could argue that racing does not have the same appeal that it used to, or at least doesn't have in the United States, that we have a video game based on World Challenge. I mean, as you see Dean Benaviste get into the fence there through Ascari, I'm just amazed and grateful that we have sims that are this specific and this catered towards a sports car racing audience. That's really, really cool in this day and age when you can't count on that always existing.
Yeah, it's, there's always going to be a NASCAR game, there's always going to be a Formula One game, but how about a sports car racing game that is so specific to the teams that are relatable to us? The cars we see on track, I mean, Kevin Bohm up there 2 seconds out of the lead of Josh Staffen, but Kevin Bohm races with CrowdStrike Racing in a car that looks exactly like the car he's racing here in the simulator. It's just like, it's unbelievable, really, to imagine how relatable the two have become.
Well, Dean Benaviste taking ahead pit lane with some significant damage. That's a real shame because he had a good run going. Up to Bill Clark in 9th. There is a battle happening between him and Matt Gefeller. Right in front, Ian Burleson had just gotten by for 8th. And next time by, I think we're going to be hitting white flag because we've only got 2 minutes left of this race. And then we'll head on over to the AM race, another 25-minute sprint. But all the gaps are starting to come back down, and Bill Clark dives into that second chicane trying to make up some time. He can't, though, and that 8 car is creeping into the picture.
They're so close together, and they are well within drafting range. This is going to get really interesting, especially in the run to and from Ascari. Also keeping tabs on the gaps between cars a little further up the road. I think they might be a little bit spread out, but Christian Locke, there they are. Brett Reichert has all of a sudden fallen into the clutches of the Mercedes of Christian Locke. And we mentioned that those front engine rear drive cars sometimes can be really good in the long run, and Locke is proving that.
White flag in the air for the race leader, Josh Staffen. Everyone else is going to pick it up this time by Reichert having to defend from Chris Locke. It is getting elbows out here in the last couple minutes of this race. And that middle stint of the race was actually sort of quiet, but that quiet has now been exchanged for the sound of thundering V8 motors. One twin turbocharged, one naturally aspirated down the front straight. But Locke unable to reel in Reichert any further. Oh, a little bit of a wiggle there on the brakes there, Tom. Maybe too much rear brake bias. Runs a little wide, and I think Locke's going to have him sized up here for a pass into that second chicane.
Yeah, he had the opportunity, but Reichert used the mid-engine platform to really square the exit up and salvage what was a mistake on the way in. You saw that happen in real time from the nose of Locke's car. But now they have a couple more chicanes. Locke really hunting on the brakes, on the sweep down to the braking zone of the second chicane.
Oh, he's in hot. He's in hot.
He's in way too hot, but all of a sudden the mid-engine platform is going to be able to square that thing up, and it's a drag race down to the first Lesmos.
Yeah, I think Locke timed it just a little bit wrong and wasn't able to completely take advantage of that, but Reichert saves it. I thought he was for sure going to get a cut course there, but he didn't. So he's going to continue to roll. Bill Clark has got a Hornet's Nest behind him as well. We'll take you there if that gets any closer. Right now, the battle for 5th is the one that's hot. Reichert in the 15 Ferrari. Chris Locke in the very brightly colored, kind of reminds me of the frozen yogurt brands all over the country, running behind him in 6th. Lifts off early. He's planning for a run towards Parabolica, Tom. He's gearing this up.
That's the way to go. You mentioned early in the broadcast that the start-finish line happens very early in the run out of that Parabolica at the front. Josh Staffen takes the win.
Josh Staffen wins at the Temple of Speed. For the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League, the pro race, Kevin Bohm comes home 2nd, Roman Alexinkov in 3rd, rounds out the podium, Zach Kuhn in 4th, and Reichert and Chris Locke nose to tail back to the stripe. Reichert's going to grab it, P5, Chris Locke in 6th. Now I'll jump back to Bill Clark because here comes Burleson. Burleson's dropped a spot to Clark, and now he can throw Matt Gefeller in the mix, and Burleson might lose 2 spots here on the last lap.
Look at the difference in cars. Down to the inside, the Bentley takes the position across the nose of Burleson in the McLaren, but it's the Porsche of Clark takes the top spot of the 3, 8th position to the 92. It's a drag race. The Bentley almost gets there, shows the nose, but is not quite going to pull it off.
Wow.
For Gefeller.
Checkered flag waving for the rest of the field. And while that is going on, we're going to take you to your race results here for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League Pro Race. The first of 2 races here tonight. Josh Staffen, Kevin Bohm, Roman Alexinkov, the podium finishers, and Kuhn and Reichert, the rest of the top 5. And look at the Ferraris there, Tom. 3 in the top 5, 4 in the top 7. That's a really, really solid run. I don't think, though, that the manufacturer is going to matter quite so much in the second race, which we're going to move to shortly. Tom, your thoughts on race 1 and how that sort of ended on a high note?
Well, the question is, moving into the M race, who had the foresight to maybe pick that Ferrari? Maybe pick a car that benefits this platform of the stability and the mid-engine platform and all of that coming into the Monza race. But I do think, especially with the AM category coming in, it's going to be about mistake minimization. We've saw a number of drivers that were kind of tricked into making mistakes, but also surviving turn 1.
All right, well, we're just getting prepared now for our AM race. We've got about 2 minutes left here in the qualifying session. Timing was a little bit closer this week. In the past, we've been already pacing on the rollout. So good to have a couple extra minutes just to get a look on who's where in qualifying. As we'll now jump off to the AM session. So you'll notice a couple drivers, Pratik Mishra joining this one as well, maybe trying to get a new lease on life and go again. Jackson Rusin doing the same. A couple other drivers popping in here in the last couple moments. But you'll notice, for the most part, different names. Jason Leach from Operation Motorsport here, the number 23. He is in the McLaren 720S. Adam Youngblood is also joining us again, and Roman Alexinkov again. So, there's a really old Lamborghini there. And the number 26 is John Willemin. What is this car? Is this the old Gallardo?
Yeah, that's one of the original Lamborghini GT3 cars, and Willemin is doing his best here in essentially back in the GT3 days. They allowed other manufacturers or independent teams to license GT3 cars. So this is a Ryder Engineering Lamborghini GT3 car, and he heads out onto the track for qualifying with not enough time to go complete another lap, but maybe he just likes the sound. Who knows?
It sounds fantastic. I didn't even know this car was in this game, to be quite frank with you. So we'll, I mean, hey, you learn something new every day. I'm excited to hear this car get to race. I'm not sure it'll be super competitive. As we get qualifying almost over here, we're going to take a moment just to debrief and talk about what's coming up this season. Of course, we've got our upcoming CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League beginning on May 12th. Of course, George Kurtz from CrowdStrike and CJ Moses from AWS, racers themselves. Of course, George Kurtz racing in the new GT America Championship this season was very successful at the first kickoff round at Sonoma, won both of those races. That was really exciting to see. And then CJ Moses was not at Sonoma, but we do expect him to be back at COTA. This time, I believe he's racing in GT America as well, so excited for that. CrowdStrike and AWS staff will be teaming up to represent their respective companies in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League Championship. So that's very, very exciting. And we're going to continue racing all through the regular season, not only just in the winter, Tom. We get to race all year long whenever we want.
And how cool is that? You know, we have this this new world where we get to race in sim racing when we can't race in the real world, and we get to race in the real world, and occasionally race in the sim racing realm as well. So, like you mentioned, we have that series kicking off in, I think you said May. At I don't know, we get a little taste of the sim racing, but all the meanwhile, we'll get to keep tabs on how these drivers are doing in their real world series at the real racetracks around the country.
Absolutely, and of course, George Kurtz also has some other races on his schedule in LMP3 cars on the IMSA side as well, and they ran back at Daytona and Sebring. We've got Kevin Bohm joining us now, second place in the pro race a little earlier. Kevin, congratulations on that and welcome.
Thanks for having me. It was a tough race out there trying to chase Josh Staffen down. He's fast out there.
He is really fast, and of course we've got Tom O'Gorman here with us tonight helping us out, and both of you guys have raced both the TCA cars on the TC America side, and we talked to Tom about his experiences there and also on the IMSA TCR side. Kevin, your experience this season, you've had one weekend so far in the TC car, and you found a lot of success there. Take us through that and how that was, your first weekend out there at Sonoma a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a dream weekend because I didn't honestly have the car very long before we had to kind of send it off to Sonoma from here in Ohio. And once I got to the track, there was still some work that I had to do to get it kind of race ready. So I had an extra day in the schedule for that. And then as practice started, I just kind of went out there, and I didn't know what the car was going to feel like. And I wasn't really happy with it to start with, but I just kept tweaking the car and kept trying to make improvements. And by the end of the weekend, we had 2 podiums and 1 race win to take away from Sonoma with it.
So I'm going to put both you guys on the spot here. Tom, your favorite race you ever competed in or won? What was the date, the situation, and what happened?
Oh, God. Man.
It could be any series, anytime.
Yeah, I think the IMSA race at Sebring that we won in 2019 was probably my favorite because we won the race at Daytona, but we didn't win it by merit. I think we won it by circumstance, and we came back out the next weekend, which was 1.5 months later. And we won it by merit, and we just went and claimed that race, and that felt so good to go out and really win the race based on the work that we put in and the pace that the car had because of that, just to put our stamp on what we could do. And
Kevin, your favorite race memory, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, it probably goes back to 2020 last year, the first race of the weekend at Indianapolis, because that race kind of sealed up the championship for me, and I felt like it kind of made up for the lost win that I never got at SCCA for the national championships that raced there. And I'm sure Tom can relate as well. He's won championships. The feeling that you have when you cross the line and the kind of championship's been clinched, and all the season's hard work has finally paid off. It's hard to replace that feeling.
Of course, you guys, Tom, you currently still race at the grassroots level, and Kevin, you mentioned the SCCA. For both of you guys, though, I feel like grassroots racing is very important to the process of getting into the pro racing level, and if you can show off your talents there, gives you a pretty good shot if you can find the funding and exposure to help get you in that spot. I know that Adam Chug also raced in NASA as well. I think he just sold his race car. He's buying a different one. But Tom, how important is grassroots racing to racing as a whole? Obviously, the World Challenge level is pretty tricky to get to, but grassroots racing still has a very important place in the racing ecosystem. What's your experience has been like at that level?
Well, it's really the heart of racing to me. I think it's racing without the business aspect to it gives you kind of the real finger of the pulse of what racing is, and you get this machine and you get this opportunity to go maximize what the machine can do on a track. And however well you can deliver and however well the machine can deliver, that's what grassroots racing is to me. And you maximize that for yourself and for the machine. obviously when you grow past the grassroots level, there's more moving parts to that, and without that kind of grassroots effort, I don't know that the professional level would get to exist, because there are so many more moving parts. But when it comes down to the raw man and machine aspect to, whether you call it amateur, club, enthusiast racing, whatever it is, it's a guy and his car, and they want to do the best they can, and without that, I don't think professional racing would exist necessarily.
Kevin, you've been the guy in the car before as well. Take us through your experiences at the grassroots level and what it's been like now to get that taste at the pro racing level with CrowdStrike Racing and DXTT.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best part about amateur racing, there's so many different series that you can choose from these days, but I think the best part is that you really can get out of it whatever you put in. And I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about even effort and kind of focusing on your driving skills and focusing on your car, and you can learn a lot about yourself and learn what works and what doesn't. And in my experience, if you kind of put that together, and I was able to win several SCCA national championships, and sort of what it took to win those races really isn't so different than what it takes to win a professional race. And I really was able to learn those lessons cheaply in club racing.
Yeah.
Of course, we've got a lot of moving parts. Tom, you mentioned those, and there's a lot of moving parts in both grassroots racing and pro racing. One of the moving parts in the DXTT camp, though, Kevin, is Operation Motorsport. They've helped you and continue to help you in your racing endeavors. Tell me a little bit about Operation Motorsport, what they do, and they've got their own sort of racing that happens in the virtual world as well.
Right. I mean, Operation Motorsport's been very key in my success in SRO. They've joined me from the beginning last season, and what they've been able to do, and they provide kind of not just for my team, but for many teams, kind of some personnel that can come and kind of experience the race weekend. And for me as a kind of a team manager / driver / many different hats, I can start to move some of those hats off myself to the members from Operation Motorsport and kind of teach them what I'm doing and why. And they're able to not just be, they're more deeply embedded in the race weekend that way. And I think that's key in the mission for Operation Motorsport.
Absolutely. I noticed a car that snuck in here that I didn't notice at first. Tom, we mentioned that John Williman is in one of those old Lamborghinis. I think I see a Jaguar out there too. That's Minton in the Jaguar, and this is a car that we haven't seen in a while. This is a real cool GT3 car.
It is. It's a cool field, but in general, I was noticing that the top six are completely unique manufacturers. We have a Bentley, we have a Honda, we have Ferrari, Porsche, McLaren, and Jaguar with Jai Minton in that kind of older style GT3 car. Again, back before we had major manufacturer support for GT3, you were allowed to kind of independently license your GT3 cars, and we have a couple of those cars represented here, not only in that Lamborghini, but also in this Jaguar.
And one of the things I love, you can see drivers warming up their tires now. Again, the AM race here tonight for the drivers that are looking for a bit more casual experience, a little less intensity placed on this. And you'll also notice that some of the drivers here are using controllers and or keyboards. And Kevin, in the past, we've seen this be a challenge for drivers to overcome, not having a wheel and pedals, but they still go out there, they still have fun. It makes it harder, I think. And then when you see a driver that can really do well with a keyboard or controller, that's honestly super impressive.
Yeah, I think if you can go fast in ACC with a controller, you're some sort of superhero. I've never been able to do it. I have to have a steering wheel and pedals, or it's gonna be a disaster. So my hat's off to these guys, some of them.
All right, Pratik Mishra in the number 7 Bentley. He was in the pro race a little earlier. He's going for a second helping here in the AM race. Jackson Rusin as well, the number 24. That's that Honda or Acura NSX GT3. Honda abroad, Acura here in the States. Martin Lassen in the number 73 rolls off in 3rd in the Ferrari to the inside of row number 2. Brock Hogan, that's a new name for us here this week, rolling off in 4th in the number 58. That is that very brightly colored CrowdStrike Porsche. Then Jason Leach in the McLaren behind. Jai Minton in the number 1. That's that Jaguar we mentioned. The number 30, driven by Wu, another Acura. Thomas Simpson in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo, very strong-looking number 72 car, the green colors on board. Going racing here for 25 minutes, though, for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League, the final race of this season before we kick things off on May the 12th with our points championship. That will kick off at Mazzano in just a couple weeks. Pratik Mishra and Jackson Rusin up front. And for the second time tonight and the final time this season, the AM drivers will go racing at the Temple of Speed. Green flag flies. We're racing at Monza. Hip check already in the backdrop as we storm towards turn number 1. Lassen gets a great start in the 73. He's going to pop out to drivers right here, Tom, on the run to turn 1.
Oh, and he's going to have a little bit of a look up to the inside. We had a big stack up at the back as one of the Acuras also did not get a good run, but then they barrel down into turn 1. A big crash between the McLaren and the Aston Martin up the nose, takes the leader out, up into turn number 1, and cuts across in the Bentley. Mishra, I think, has survived.
Yeah, he made it through, and it looks like the Ferrari's going to make it through as well. That's going to split up the field. That was Youngblood that went tumbling through turn number 1 with help from another driver. Didn't see who initially got the contact made, but Kevin, turn 1 here at Monza, it always gets exciting, and maybe a little bit too exciting for some of the drivers at the front that time.
Yeah, I mean, when you have such a tight corner, and as we have some more argy-bargy here in the second chicane, so it's tough when you have these really tight turns and so many cars to get through clean.
And here comes the 6th place starter. He's off course in the Jaguar, and that's going to turn the lead back over to the Ferrari. That's Lassen in the number 73, and very chaotic and dynamic first lap there, Tom. And sometimes to win the race, actually always to win the race, you got to first finish the race. And so far, looks like the 73 is the best driver to do that.
There's been so much shuffling, but we still have 5 unique makes and manufacturers up in the top 5. The Ferrari leads the way. The Porsche big in the draft. They down into Ascari. The Ferrari is the only one to really nail the entry there. The Porsche falls back and holds up the Acura just a little bit. But now all of them kind of bustling for second place. The Jaguar had the lead for a moment, and all of a sudden Minton has got a bit of a run down into the Parabolica for the first corner, the first lap.
And Kevin, we were talking a little bit earlier about BOP in this race tonight, because at Monza, given the long straightaways, that had to be fairly important. What did you feel in the Mercedes compared to the Acura? Did you feel like you were gaining it anywhere specifically?
Well, honestly, I don't think I was quite close enough to really be able to tell, but from my experience in other races, the Acura tends to have just a little bit higher top speed, kind of at the end of the really long straightaways, and the Mercedes is really good at kind of getting off the apex of the turn using its torque. So I think between those two things on the track, we were pretty even, and yeah, I would need quite a bit more practice out there to be able to match Josh.
Roman Alexeinkov on the attack there. I believe that is Jason Leach in the number 23. We saw Minton go off again in turn number 1, Tom, but this scrap 4 position is going to be cycling for about 5th or 6th spot here.
Well, Minton's really struggling in the Jaguar. Oh, Alexeinkov is decisively up the inside 4th, a second chicane, and picks the position off in that Ferrari. So now he is the 2nd Ferrari on the road, 5th place on the track, and this is the driver that finished 3rd place in the pro race. So I have to imagine the number 612 car there on the left side of your screen, that Ferrari has to be one of the fastest of any driver that we've seen tonight, as he's now working his way down to the Ascari there in that white and blue Ferrari, now side by side almost between the McLaren and the Ferrari, but it's still Lassen at the front in another one of the Ferraris, which we saw were very, very much the choice car in the pro race, maybe here in the M race with a wider set of experience in the sim. Perhaps that's benefiting them.
Kevin, this racetrack, you know, you can look at this on a map and say, well, this is a really simple racetrack, but I find this place, at least in the sims that I drive, I find this place actually kind of challenging to get right, because the corner exits are so consequential. You know, how much are you focusing on corner exit, and how much do you focus on braking? Because it seems like you have to give up one or the other to be fast somewhere.
Well, I mean, a track like this at first glance, just like you said, is very simple, and really what it comes down to, because there's no there's no big places to gain time. You have to do it a little bit at a time everywhere. So really what that means is kind of focusing back to the fundamentals, and that goes starts in the brake zone, and really it's more important about being precise where you start braking and being really precise with when and how you start releasing the brake, and that controls how much speed you can get through the apex on these really tight chicanes. And then just like you said, it's really important to at the same time in parallel with that, be committed to getting to full throttle as smoothly and quickly as you can to carry the speed down the straightaway. And if you do that all the way around this lap, you can sort of find free time. It's amazing from the first time you feel like you're on the limit, and then you start focusing back to the fundamentals. You can gain a second or second and a half at a track like this.
Whoa, Chris Hayswingle going for a bit of a ride through the second chicane. Tom, braking especially in GT3 cars with the anti-lock brakes, you can essentially stand on them. But this sim in particular, Assetto Corsa Competizione, has a bit of a different feel on the brakes. Feels like you can be a lot more aggressive on them. What was your experience like in this sim, and how did it translate, of course, your short time in the Acura NSX in testing? What translated, if anything?
Well, it's almost a trap, to be honest, because you think these cars have so much technology. You have a lot of driver aids, you have traction control and yaw control and ABS, and you want to lean on them a bit, but really, if you rely on the ABS, as the Acura does up the outside down to the Parabolica, the 24 car of Racing keeps the third position. It can almost bite you because you don't want to be braking as late as possible into the corner and trying to brake too deep. You want to be rolling that speed. You want to keep the momentum up, and you have to be able to balance using the driver aids to your advantage, but also making sure that you're not overslowing and making sure you're not hurting yourself on that raw speed.
So this is a question for both of you. I'm going to start with Kevin on this. You guys have both driven a lot of very lightweight cars in your careers. Is it beneficial to take what you learn about carrying momentum from a lightweight car, Kevin, and does that translate to the heavier, more powerful cars in the same way? So if you were to learn in something like a Spec Miata and then take what you've learned to a Mercedes-AMG GT3, is that going to translate, or is it a completely different experience that you have to readjust to every single time?
I think it carries over a lot, and really when you're driving a really low horsepower lightweight car, that's when it's really, really important to focus on the fundamentals of where you brake and how you trail off the brake, and you start to sort of split hairs on where you're doing these things and how much you're braking, and all that slowly adds up into lap time, and then really it's the exact same thing at a track like Monza here. You're really just focused on the momentum, focused on the fundamentals, and it's just these little pieces of the lap that really give you lap time.
And Tom, your experiences, of course, you drive everything under the sun at track days and that sort of thing. What sort of adjustment process, if any, from a lightweight car to a heavier car like a Camaro?
Well, I think it's down to thinking of everything as a momentum car and then adapting to what the car can do or will need you to do. As the battle for the lead is really heating up, Lassen and Alex Steenkoff, who we saw. Alex Steenkoff finished third in the pro race. He has now all of a sudden found his way from the back of this pack, hunting the 61 to the outside down, and this race is not anywhere close to over. 17 minutes to go. Sorry, the 6:12. They're going to be nose to tail going down into turn number one. Come back to the question.
Side by side into the first corner. Oh, Rusin's way deep on the brakes, and he's not going to make it. He's going to drive off in turn number one. Side by side for the top spot, though. Lassen hangs on. He had driver's right, leaving the chicane, and Alex Steenkoff will tuck in behind. But look behind who's showing up. Brock Hogan in his 58 car for Operation Motorsport. Again, a new name here this week, and closing in very, very fast in these front two.
Doing a great job, and again, Alex Steenkoff, I think, is the class of the field right now as far as pace goes, but the question is, can he rattle Lassen? So far, Lassen has been so completely consistent, even when under attack. But to go back to your question, all cars are momentum cars, and then it's just about maximizing the way they drive. So if you have a 4,000-pound car, you got to figure out how to make that 4,000 pounds carry momentum around a road course, and a lot of times that means kind of leading the weight into doing what you need it to do. It means kind of tricking the car into being strong around a road course versus a lighter car kind of lets you get away with a little bit more. All the meanwhile, I always say that Lassen takes the lead.
He looks like he's actually going to give it up to Alex Steenkoff there, and Brock Hogan now closes in on Lassen for second. Big jump over the curbs through Ascari. Hogan apexing a little later, but Alex Sinkov out like a rocket ship at the pointy end of the field there. And Kevin, once you break that draft, are you pretty much home free, you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, you still have to kind of mind your dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure you don't make any mistakes. But yeah, once you're clear of the draft, it makes it a lot easier around here, because the draft can be worth about a half a second to 3/4 of a second around this track.
Tracking out really wide. Oh, Alex Sinkov can hit pit lane. And Brock Hogan can move back over to the right. Again, no required pit stop there, so it could be a penalty. Oh, there might be. Side by side for the top spot, though. Hogan on driver's right. Lassen on driver's left. The Porsche is going to go through, but the Ferrari's better on the brakes here, Tom, into turn 1.
Oh, it's so tight again. The outside line. The 73 gets a little bit behind on this. This is the back end, gets tagged from the NSX and around. Now we have a drag race between the 24. Jackson Rusin finds himself in a drag race from the previous race winner. Race leader, Austin Murphy up the inside. Lassen is completely checked out in the pink Porsche.
That was a big mistake for the driver who looped it there down in turn 1, Brock Hogan. Actually, that was not Brock Hogan. Excuse me, that was Lassen. Hogan leads the way. Murphy and Rusin still fighting for second. And the more they battle like this, the more they're going to lose time. And Kevin, you've been in the situation a bunch where you've been battling, competitors, or you've been watching people battle, and it just loses so much time. You'd much rather just get single file and focus on trying to catch the guy ahead.
Right. I mean, if you're the car that's leading the race, the more they fight, the happier you get, and you sort of pull away. But if you're the guys battling, you kind of want to figure out how you can better the other car and then put your head down and chase down the leader.
Ascari, Murphy's through. Does he have the pace to run down Brock Hogan? Hogan's been lapping fairly consistently, Tom, and what I like about Hogan is that it doesn't look super ragged from Operation Motorsport. He's very tidy and collected, which I like to see. That means he can be consistent.
Definitely very clean on the Porsche's part. The number 58, you see him kind of squaring up the corner just a little bit, trying to rely on the rear engine platform. Excuse me. The battle behind, though, Murphy and Rusin, the Ferrari versus the NSX. The NSX now all of a sudden finds itself a bit down. Excuse me again. But Kevin said the NSX is very fast in a straight line, and look at it close up in the draft. Maybe has a look down to the inside of the turn 1.
Dive on the brakes into the first corner. Rusin wants back by. They're going to touch. And a little awkward exchange there. The 52 is going to hang on. A lot of blocks in the way from someone running a little bit wide, but Murphy muscles his way on by. Jason Leach from Operation Motorsport up to 4th. We've got 2 Operation Motorsport drivers inside the top 5 right now. Pratik Mishra in the number 7 up to 5th. And Martin Lassen, who looped it around earlier, to 6th. Adam Youngblood, remember, he had his loop in the opening corner, Kevin. He's rebounded nicely.
That's right. After you kind of have an issue, especially at the beginning of the race, all you can really do is put your head down and hit your marks, and you just try to let the race come to you. And as some of these cars get spun and some of the positions kind of exchange around, it helps him get back in the battle.
Back to second place again, Jackson Rusin trying to run Austin Murphy back down, get the halfway point here in this race. Having a look at the details of the weather at the top right. Air temp 23 degrees Celsius, track temp 31 degrees Celsius. I don't know the conversion in my head, so I'm going to look it up. Tom, track temperature, how important is that to GT3 cars, or just any race car in general, to their performance?
Well, as the track degrades, the grip degrades, and you've got to be really on top of the car to kind of predict. I don't know that it's changed much since the beginning of this race, but it certainly exacerbates mistakes. And if you're a little bit too deep on the brakes, if you're a little bit too much on the wheel, we got a drag race down to the Parabolica halfway through the race. Mishra up the inside of the McLaren takes a spot in the Bentley. But again, if you're too deep on the brakes, if you make that mistake, you don't have any grip to salvage it, and the McLaren can easily come back. And now we've got a Ferrari looking to challenge this. It's a 3-way battle for 4th.
That's Lassen in 6th place. He'd like to grab some spots back. That 31 degrees Celsius is 88 degrees Fahrenheit. So not very toasty by any stretch of the imagination, but Lassen drag racing by in the fire red Ferrari. And whoa, slide out Mishra on the brakes, and Jason Leach is going to back out. And that, to me, Kevin, is one of, as I say that, they're going to get tangled. And
Lassen was the race winner, race leader up until a couple of laps ago, and he picked up 2 positions in just that one quick straightaway, and now all of a sudden struggling a bit, but Murphy, I think these Ferraris are really, really strong here.
And he just took the lead away from Brock Hogan, so Austin Murphy's the new race leader. Jackson Roosin trying to run him down. They're also getting the lap traffic here. So Kevin, lap traffic, how chaotic can that be here in this race? And should Austin Murphy be a little careful?
Well, I mean, the good thing about Monza is that there's so many straightaways. So when you're the leader, you're hoping you're going to catch one of these cars in the straightaway, and you can kind of get by really quickly. But you also have to be playing kind of a prediction game, and try to figure out where you're going to catch this car, and really be paying attention to what they're doing, so you don't let them distract you as we catch them here in this chicane.
Tom, your experiences with lap traffic, you raced in a multi-class series where you were the slower of the two categories. What's that like being the slower? What's it like being the faster?
Well, I've been the slowest, the middle, and the fastest, all three of them, and it's such a unique experience. You think it's kind of a roulette. Oh, up in the lead, is that lap traffic contact with Murphy?
And Hogan, whoa, look out. They're going to touch again on corner exit. Brock Hogan smells blood in the water here. He is coming for the race lead as the two Ferraris tangle. Under 10 minutes to go. Hogan with a huge run here, trying to get by the 666. That's Jeffrey Walter.
So clearly no friendly behavior between the manufacturers. The Ferraris contact between lap traffic and the race leader again, and then the race leader is going to get fully punted up into turn 1.
Got cleared out. Hogan taking the normal line. Ferrari's rejoining, and Hogan's going to sweep on by. That was the race leader, so now the long way around.
And one of the cars we didn't think would be particularly strong all of a sudden finds itself in the lead. It's the Porsche of Hogan. But to answer your question, you really have a lot more control of the situation as a either the fastest, middle, or slowest car in the race. You just got to be able to manipulate the situation as best you can. And unfortunately, it looks like the lap traffic is a little bit more unpredictable than it may be in the real world, in my experience. But you kind of, even lifting in the middle of a straightaway, even really massive loss of control there from Murphy. But you can do little things here and there to make sure that you're not getting hung out to dry by other classes.
Well, Brock Hogan took that opportunity to drive away at the front of the field, Kevin, looking in the mirrors, seeing a small dot there. We just saw what happened to Austin Murphy as the race leader. Does that worry you if you're Brock Hogan?
Well, I mean, I think if there's anything we've learned in the last 5 laps is that if you're in the lead, everybody's gunning for you right now. So I think if I was Hogan right now, I'd still be trying to just keep as clean as possible and see if I can maintain that, because I think the safest thing he can do right now is to just kind of keep a gap to all the other cars.
Coming to 8 minutes to go here, the last 4 or 5 laps beginning now. We've got a battle shaping up for 7th place between Martin Lassen and Minton, who's in that very classic looking Jaguar. And don't get to ride on board with these a whole lot. Look at that, there's a leather style dash. That's not something you'd see a lot in a GT3 car nowadays, you know, carbon fiber or something of the sort. English style there, Tom. It's a good looking car. I kind of wish they had, I mean, it's got character. That's what it's got.
Yeah. It's the leather dash and the hood vents in the Jag. But down the front straightaway here at Monza, picking up the next lap for Jai Minton. And remember, this car led a little bit on the very first lap. The number 1 car has a lot of pace in it, and I think it's kind of fallen a little bit too far back out of the lead battle to pick up a podium potentially, but has really set its sights on previous race leader Lassen. This is going to be a really interesting battle if the Jag can run it down.
Moving back forward to Jason Leach. He's got pressure coming from behind. Both of these cars from English manufacturers. Leach in the McLaren and Adam Youngblood in the Aston Martin. And while they are both English GT or sports cars, Kevin, they are very different. The McLaren being mid-engine, the Aston Martin being front-engine. And both very nice, and I'd like to have both of them in my driveway.
That's right, and really when you're driving both of these, they're going to drive completely different because of that that different weight balance. The engine's a really heavy component of these cars, and whether it's behind the driver or in front of the driver, it can really change the kind of handling dynamics of the car, and even how it brakes, and how the grip changes, and lots of different things like that. So you really have to drive the car based on how that car makes grip.
Drag race here for 5th spot. Leach goes driver's left. Youngblood on driver's right. Tommy didn't go defensive. Why?
Well, I I'm not sure exactly there. He must be very confident on the brakes. The McLaren easily shuts the door. And the other question is, do you want the inside or do you want the outside? You know, racing is all about speed versus distance. And around the outside, you can carry a whole lot more speed. You see the slingshot that McLaren gets Leach up the up the outside down the front straightaway. Just blasts past the lapped Ferrari, let alone Youngblood there behind in his rearview mirror. I don't hate defending the outside, actually, down into the Parabolica if it comes down to the checkered flag.
We've seen the field spread out just a little bit at the front. Brock Hogan, the 58 car, has set his sights on clear racetrack ahead. Jackson Rusin in second in the number 24. He's dodged and weaved a few times tonight. Austin Murphy was the leader. You see the damage to that car he's been run into and has hit other things as well. And, you know, Kevin, sometimes just finishing the race after a night like Austin Murphy has had, even a podium would still be a miracle after getting punted that hard into turn one. So I think at the end of a night like this, you got to just be still counting your blessings.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, essentially, you can't worry about things that are outside of your control. And if you can salvage a podium after a rough day, then that's still something to take back and kind of, it's still some success, and you can still learn from the things you did right and make it a good day anyway.
Well, a little bit of a slip there, and Pratik Mishra would be the one behind him in Ascari. We'll see if the 7 can run him down. No other battles on the racetrack at the moment. They've kind of all sorted out. Brock Hogan continues to lead. 4 minutes and 23 seconds left. Thinking I'm going to guess about 3 laps to go, maybe 2 this time by as we come across the line. Jackson Rusin unable to reel him in. Last lap by for Hogan was a 1:51.351, which is only 3 thousandths off of his best time of the race. And interestingly, no one, except for Root Berra, who is out of the race now, has run their best lap of their previous lap. We've seen in the past, Tom, that sometimes these cars will actually pick up pace as the race goes on, as their fuel load dissipates. Is that something that you would expect to see as the car gets faster as the run goes on, or would you just expect the tires to wear out a little bit?
Maybe mildly, but this is such a short race. I think it's more the driver getting comfortable. As now we see Rusin stuck behind lap traffic. It looks like Minton had a big problem in the Jag. We were just talking him up, and all of a sudden he has been through the pit lane, looks a little bit ragged in the Jag as he overshoots the second chicane and will pull aside almost easily, letting Jackson Rusin go by, but Rusin still loses a little bit of time on the exchange.
Ragged Jag sounds like a really cool band name. I'm a fan of that. But Rusin does move on through. Austin Murphy, Pratik Mishra, and Jason Leach, the rest of the top 5. And for Brock Hogan, the question is, where is he in relation to the start-finish line? To get about a minute until we will get our white flag. But I'm thinking we'll be 2 laps to go next time by. Sweeping through Ascari here. And using this rear-engine platform. But looking at the order here, Kevin, we've got, as Tom stated at the very beginning, 6 different manufacturers in the top 6. And it seems like super diverse here. You know, I think driver limited rather than car limited here tonight. Really cool to see this much diversity in the cars.
Yeah, I mean, in general, these cars are all going to be capable of kind of creating a very similar lap time. So, especially in this race, as some of these drivers are still kind of learning sim racing and improving their skills, the car is gonna be a little bit less important than kind of the lessons that they're learning by just turning laps.
So this will be 2 laps to go for Brock Hogan in the number 58. Leads by 5 seconds. Things are getting a little tighter back here for 5th. Adam Youngblood and Jason Leach. Both these cars have some damage to the noses. And Tom, even the slightest bit of damage, not usually helpful in any way. It can honestly seriously hurt you. Do you think there's anything that could be holding Youngblood back? I mean, could it be that damage?
Well, yeah, it potentially is damage, but I think it's just the overall gap to the car in front. It's more about focusing on the car behind, less focusing on the car behind, but focusing on what you can do to minimize the car behind catching you. As you see Youngblood running just a little bit wide, coming onto this run between the first and second chicanes, it's much less likely that Youngblood catches Mitra ahead as it is that Leach catches him. So he's just got to put his head down, not really focus on the cars around him, and maximize the amount of speed that he's got left in the race, because with only 2 laps left, 1.5 at this point, there's a lot more opportunity for mistake than there is in capitalizing on the speed you have.
And Kevin, that's got to be a situation every race car driver runs into. Is, I've sort of the bet is made, and now you got to lay in it. There's not a lot I can do to advance my position, but there is stuff I can do to prevent myself from making a mistake. Is that a common feeling in the race car where you feel like you can't do anything to move forward, or do you always feel like there's a little bit more to gain?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're always optimistic, but you have to be realistic as well. And as the time counts down in the race, if the gap is really big in front of you and there's a car that you can see in the mirror, then you have to at least be focused on maintaining your position, because maybe something outside of your control will allow you to gain a couple more positions if something happens in front of you, but you don't want to be the one to blame to let a car that's catching you from behind pass you on the last lap or something like that.
White flag for Brock Hogan one more time around Monza for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. He ran over a piece of fence, and here comes the Jaguar sweeping around the outside of Curva Grande with a whole head of steam. Minton wants that lap back, and he got it. That's one way to do it, Tom.
Yeah, I think Minton might have skipped the first chicane. If we had an instant replay, we might have seen him just completely blowing all these chicanes now, just going as fast as he possibly can, thinking, why the heck not? Maybe track record, who knows? Pays for it, down into the tires almost for the one. Got nothing left to lose.
Yeah, why not right at this point in the race? Hogan working his way around, just trying to stay out of the destruction path of the Jaguar. That looks like something out of James Bond, probably, as he went sweeping through the chicane. Jackson Rusin survived this one. I think he's in pretty good shape right now to come home in second. Austin Murphy in this 52 had a pretty solid run here, Tom, and I think if he could just pick up the podium, he'd be mighty happy just to get this race over with.
Yeah, I think for sure. There's been a lot of ebb and flow to this race. I think at one point we expected one of the other Ferraris who was so successful in the pro race to be successful, and all of a sudden they're nowhere to be found. So it's consistency that is key here at the closing minutes of the Monza race. And Murphy, you see all the wear on that car, but Hogan is at the front.
Brock Hogan in the number 58 for Operation Motorsport sweeps out of Parabolica. And he will come on through and win the AM race in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League at the Temple of Speed, victorious at Monza. Jackson Rusin was going to pick up second place in the number 24, and Austin Murphy, trials and tribulations. He will come on through and pick up a third. Pratik Mishra was about to run him down. He'll come home fourth under the green, yellow, and red smoke. Adam Youngblood, a top 5 result for him. Jason Leach, Martin Lassen, battling a little bit. Well, I think Lassen did get by. Indeed, he did. So Martin Lassen will come home in 6th. Jason Leach in 7th. And I think John Williman will be the 8th driver to come on through. Here's Hayes Winkle, also involved in that battle here, coming back to the stripe. And Williman in that Huracan, and one of the coolest looking cars out there. As they come on through, a bit of a slide there. But Brock Hogan gets it done. Here's a look at your race results, and Kevin started out a little bit wild, but it did settle in there, and Brock Hogan drove through, and he was the fastest one out there.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's what you got to do. You have to survive, and if you can be the one that survives the cleanest, then you can come out on top. And yeah, he did a great job. Once he got through all the chaos, he was able to kind of control the race and bring it home to a win.
Tom, we saw some really solid racing in the pro race earlier, but also in the AM race. Murphy and Rusin both capitalizing on the mistakes made by others, but Lassen, the missed opportunity perhaps, comes home 5th.
Yeah, it's a lot more ebb and flow in this race, which you would expect from the AM drivers. I think it's a bit more likely that a driver makes a mistake with less experience, and this is a track that certainly baits you into that with so many braking zones, so many tight corners, and really high quality racing, I think. Maybe more than I even expected. It was a lot of fun to watch. A lot of fun to watch. Of course, we've got more of this racing coming up this year. This is the last run for this season, but our next season will begin on May 12th at Misano for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. Visit CrowdStrikeRacing.com to learn more. And make sure to tune in on GT World for the next round of the Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS Championship. That will be at Circuit of the Americas in just a couple weeks at the tail end of April. You can watch George Kurtz, of course, Colin Brown, and the DXDT guys, of course, David Askew, and others also going for victory in the GT3 categories. Kevin Bohm will be back racing at COTA in the TC car. So, Kevin, best of luck to you, and thanks for joining us here tonight.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
And with that, we're going to wrap up the broadcast here tonight. Thank you so much for watching here. Make sure to subscribe to the CrowdStrike Racing YouTube channel for more. Again, we'll be back here on May the 12th. And a huge thanks to all those that make this happen behind the scenes. Robin Montanola, of course, Danielle and Bob, and all those at CrowdStrike Racing and AWS who allow this to happen and make it happen. Of course, CrowdStrike Racing and CrowdStrike, the official cybersecurity provider of the Mercedes-AMG Petronas F1 team. So if you're an F1 fan, you can catch the CrowdStrike logos on that pace car as well. We're going to see you in COTA in just a few weeks' time. We'll also see you back here in Assetto Corsa Competizione in just a few weeks on May 12th. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time here on CrowdStrike Racing.